I know it's important for you guys to feel comfortable and to feel like you're at home, so I just want to set your minds at ease and let you know, yes, I'm wearing my Crocs. And yes, Mike, they are one of my two beautiful two-tone pairs. I just want you to understand that, so now that you feel comfortable and you feel like you're at home, yay, we're ready to do some English. Who's excited? Me, and you, I hope. All right, let's get to it. But before we do, I do want to give you a heads up. As was stated in your syllabus that was sent home, we did have plans to do the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe project. I apologize. I wish that would have worked out. Obviously, with the circumstances that we can't control, we can't do that. And I have to make sure that everybody has equal access to viewing what we were seeing and then to computers and so on. And I know that's not going to be the case, so we're going to have to interrupt that project for now. However, I do want you to know that I have full, good, solid plans to get back to that, and that should still be our major fourth quarter project on which we'll do that big writing assignment. But until then, what I would like for us to do, as you let me get my stuff out of the way, what I want to do over these next 2 weeks, as you've seen on the piece of paper, front and back, that I've sent home, is we're going to talk about agreement. And I will tell you that, as is listed on your paper, that's going to involve Chapter 9 for 9th grade, so Chapter 9 for 9th grade, Chapters 10 and 11 for 8th grade, 10 and 11 for 8th grade, and Chapters 9 and 10 for 7th grade. 9 and 10 is chapters for 7th grade. And so we're going to be discussing agreement, we're going to be testing over that, and there will be several aspects to just certain words and sentences that need to be in agreement. And today what we're going to be discussing for our first lesson on Monday are subjects and predicates. Now remember, predicates, that's just a fancy word for verbs. So don't forget that. We had a whole chapter on it, and we dealt a lot with predicates or verbs, and that goes all the way back to Chapter 4. But the agreement of subjects and predicates are so very vital. I will give you a heads up about a rule, and you understand I'm not going to have room to put everything on the board. I'll put the most significant things up there that are going to help you to understand what we're doing, and especially at test time also. You don't need me to tell you this, but keep in mind that whatever it is that you take down in notes, you get to use that for your test, and I've expanded that for math. We don't normally do that for math, but I've expanded it in these extraordinary circumstances to cut you guys a little bit of slack, because I know it's not as easy when we're not all in person every day. But English stays the same as far as whatever notes you take, you get to use on your test. And they're also going to help you when you're studying for your test. So make sure you at least write everything down on the board. And I'd encourage you to also write some other things that I suggest that you'd find of significance along the way. Now, I do want to give you this piece of helpful advice. I started to tell you, I'm not going to have room to put it on the board, but whenever you have a subject in the third person, okay, like is pronouns, he, she, they, it, those are some examples, but also like this first sentence, the boy, or the boys on the plural side of things. Either way, when it reads as a narrative and it's not first person, which in the subjective case would be I. When it's not second person, the subjective case would be you. But it's found in the form of pronouns like he, she, it, they, or the boy, the boys. It just reads like a narrative. That's third person. And whenever you have a subject that's in third person, if that subject is singular, then you also have to have a singular verb that follows it. If you have a plural verb, you also have to have a plural verb that follows it. Okay? And that's true generally speaking as well, but these third person cases are a little bit unique in this way. What we typically use to determine a singular or a plural subject is whether there's an S or an ES on the end. Now I realize there are exceptions to every rule, and that's one of them, but 9 times out of 10 plus, if there's no S on the end of the subject, then that is understood to be a singular subject. Now, what can be a little bit tricky in concept, but it's not in what we really understand in proper speaking and writing, we do it so frequently, is that a singular verb is the opposite. It typically has an S or an ES at the end. However, on the plural side of things, a plural subject is ordinarily going to end with an S or an ES, and you have to have a plural verb to be in agreement with that plural subject. Again, I would say what's a little bit tricky about that when you're talking in the third person, what can be a little bit tricky is that plural verb is not going to end in S or ES. So verbs operate really in their plurality or singularity in an opposite way as to what subjects do. Now, how about this one? If you're trying to put a present tense verb, let me say this one as far as eating goes. I'm going to use, even though I don't have his name, I'm going to use Nikolai. Nikolai, look alive. Nikolai, look alive. I'm going to use Nikolai as an example because I saw from social media, it was on Facebook, he and his family were out having some fun around a campfire. And so Nikolai is a boy, and I saw the boy doing something around that campfire, and it involved putting food in his mouth. Now, if I were to use a present tense verb, what would I do? What would I plug in for this sentence as far as putting food in one's mouth, and it's a present tense verb? Would I say the boy eats, or would I say the boy eat by the campfire? If I'm viewing it right now taking place, and we'll act like I am, let's say it's Facebook Live, would it be the boy eats or the boy eat? Obviously, we understand the boy eats. But I want you to notice the rule and why it is that way. Because boy is singular, and singular nouns, and especially subjects, they typically don't have an S on them. So you have to have a singular verb, but remember, verbs operate the opposite of nouns, and a singular verb, you typically have an S, or if proper, an ES on the end. And so that's the rule as far as why we always say, not the boy eat, but the boy eats by the campfire. Now, how about this one? I saw, by the way, on Facebook, social media, not only Nikolai, but also I saw his dad, Micah, eating by the campfire. Now, how would I use putting food in one's mouth, okay, but as a plural verb because I have a plural subject? Well, remember the third person, that a plural subject is the opposite of a noun. It typically does not end in an S or an ES. And so that's why I say the boys eat, because the noun has an S, and therefore the verb typically should not have an S at the end of it. The boys eat by the campfire. This, guys, is only for the present tense in the third person. Let me give you an example. If I were to use past tense, the boy, would I say ate by the campfire? Obviously not. I would say the boy ate by the campfire. Well, for the plural subject, would I change anything? Would I say the boys ate? No, that's not a word, right? Again, I would say the boys ate by the campfire. There's no difference if it's past tense, but also there's no difference if it's future tense. If I were describing future of putting food into mouth, would I say the boy will eats by the campfire? No. I would say the boy will eat by the campfire. Over here, would I say the boys will eat by the campfire? Same thing as prior. I would say the boys will eat by the campfire. So you see, the verb doesn't change on the basis of the plurality or singularity of the subject if it's past or if it's future tense, but if it's present tense, that's where the significance is found. Okay, for numbers 2 through 5, I really want to concentrate on these verbs that I have over here in parentheses. And we're going to be considering a B form, okay, for number 2 all the way across. For number 3, the form of do all the way across. For number 4, the form of have all the way across. And those do change when in the present tense, understand. But those do change on the basis of whether your subject is singular or whether it's plural. These verbs, be, do, and have, are all helping verbs, or if you prefer, some call them auxiliary verbs. I like the common person approach and just say they're helping verbs. I think that makes a lot more sense. But auxiliary verbs, or helping verbs, these are examples, be, do, and have, and they are special ones in that they do need to change if they are used with other main or leading verbs. And this is only going to be the case, again, I would emphasize, though, in the present tense. Okay, remember, be is an irregular form of verb, and when I have to pause and redo the board up here, we're going to go give a whole set of rules, of special rules for the verb be, because it is irregular and it's so unique of itself, it just kind of needs its own section. But we're just going to briefly consider right now, how would I say on number 2, a form of be, he something sleeping in a tent. Well, remember, it's an irregular form and it just totally changes on the basis of tense being used and that sort of thing. A form of be is. What I use here, is or are. He are sleeping in a tent, or he is. I would use is. He is. Oh, I'm on the wrong one, aren't I? Sorry about that. Let me erase here really quickly. Number 2, not number 3, Mr. Derek. He is sleeping in a tent. But this is kind of a hint, though. You can look. It's a singular subject, and the verb so happens to also end in S. Well, usually that is the case, although there can be exceptions. We would say he is sleeping in a tent. All right, number 2, for a plural subject, would you say they is sleeping in a tent, that form of be, or would you say they are sleeping in a tent? Which one would you use? Now, you see, these are so common sense that I don't think you guys would miss these anyway if we took the test right now, some of these really basic ones. But what I want to do, though, is explain the rules behind it so that when we get more comprehensive and some more difficult ones, which we're going to have down here, in number 7 for sure, that we can understand the principle behind it and it will be more accurate on a regular basis. So, they are sleeping. Plural subject, look, I don't have an S at the end of that verb. So, he is sleeping in a tent, they are sleeping in a tent. All right, how about a form of do? If I really want to emphasize that verb, as we learned in a previous chapter, we can do with a form of the word do. What would I put on number 3? He do sleep in a tent, or he does sleep in a tent? Well, that's pretty easy, right? We understand he does, not he do. He do. No, he does. He does sleep in a tent. But if you'll notice, singular subject, look in what letter the verb ends. In S. That's not a coincidence. Singular verbs are the opposite of nouns. They typically do end in S. All right, how about number 3 over here? Would you also say the plural subject, they does sleep in a tent, or would you say they do sleep in a tent? We know that it would be they do sleep in a tent, and nothing else just by the way it sounds, because we're so accustomed to using it correctly, which is a beautiful thing. But we also need to understand why it's that way. They, a plural subject, we need a plural verb. Remember, plural verbs often do not end in S, and that's why we use that one there. All right, number 4, let's use the present tense of the helping verb have. Use the present tense of the helping verb have. You notice in all these, sleeping, sleep, slept, sleeping, sleep, slept, the main verb doesn't change whenever you're using a helping verb. But it's that helping verb, and if you get multiple helping verbs, it's that first helping verb that we'll show here in just a minute that does change. Okay, so how about have or has? Would you say he have slept in a tent, or he has slept in a tent? Duh, duh, duh. He has slept in a tent. Look, singular subject, singular verb, unlike a subject, often ends in S. So you see that rule being repeated over and over and over. How about plurality? They, would you say has slept in a tent, or have? We know it's they have slept in a tent. Why is that? Plural subject, you need a plural verb. Plural verbs, typically, unlike subjects, they don't end in S. Now, I realize these plural subjects here don't end in S either. Remember, there are some exceptions to the rule, and especially when you're dealing with pronouns. But outside of that, you're going to find it to be the case on the norm. All right, how about number 5? Would you say he has been sleeping in a tent, or he have been sleeping in a tent? Well, that's not much different than the one up here. It remains singular subject, singular verb, needs to end in S. He has, but look here. We have two verbs that, regardless of whether it's singular or plural subject, they're not going to change. He, some verb, been sleeping. They, some verb, been sleeping. You don't change the second helping verb. You don't change the main verb, but you change the leading helping or auxiliary verb. Would you say they has been sleeping in a tent, or they have been? Look, as above, it's no different. But you don't change the second helping verb. You only change the first helping verb, and you do not change the main verb. Again, I would emphasize when we're speaking in the present tense. Okay, for numbers 6 and 7, these are going to be slightly different in that we're dealing with not only singular or plural subjects, but in the plurality of subjects, we're actually dealing with compound subjects that are still plural. Number 6 over here is not a plural subject, it is a singular one. Let's say that Micaiah, we're going to use the verb form appear, okay? Would you say that Micaiah appear, or Micaiah appears in Act 3 of the play? Well, she does a lot of plays, and she does a lot of appearances, consequently. You wouldn't say Micaiah appear in Acts 3, you would say Micaiah appears. Coincidentally, look, the subject is singular, and therefore the verb needs to be singular, unlike typical subjects that are plural that would end in S, okay? Whenever you have a singular verb, it typically is going to end in an S. A singular subject usually doesn't end in an S. A singular verb usually does. And that's the rule behind why. And we would know just by reading. We wouldn't say, oh, Micaiah appeared. We would say Micaiah appears, but that's the reason behind it. Now, if I had a compound subject, which I do over here in number 6, which ends up of itself being, I guess you could say maybe somewhat of an irregular plural subject, and I apologize, Micaiah and Andolin, but I don't have enough space on my board, so I had to abbreviate your names. Number 6. Under plural, Micaiah and Andolin. Now I'm going to underline each of these parts of my compound subject once. Micaiah, Andolin. Okay? That's my compound subject. Would you say Micaiah and Andolin appear, or Micaiah and Andolin appears in Act 3? Because the compound subject is acting as a plural, you would say Micaiah and Andolin appear with no S, because it's a plural subject on the basis of its compound. And so I need a plural verb. Well, a plural verb is the opposite of a plural noun. It typically doesn't have an S at the end. Now, this is one of those exceptions. There's no S at the end of my plural subject either, but because it's compound, it's like it's S, because two girls, plural, with an S, are being considered, and it maybe comes through clearer that way, but I'm not going to have an S at the end of my verb. This is the one that I really want to emphasize, okay? It's so easy to miss, and be really careful about this one. Whenever you use the conjunction and to join compound subjects, or the coordinating conjunctions both and, all right, so if you use and, or if you use both and, then you're going to need a plural verb. However, if you use the conjunctions or, nor, the combination of either or neither nor, all right, now I'm not going to write those on the board, but you'll want to write these down. If you use the conjunctions or, nor, either or the combination of neither nor, then what you have to do in that case, you have only one of the two really that's being considered in connection to the verb itself. And the verb has to be in agreement to whatever noun of those two, whatever subject of those two is closer to it. Now let me give you an example, number 7. Neither the actors nor the director, and we're going to talk about how they're feeling. A lot of people aren't feeling well right now, unfortunately. So let's talk about how the actors and the director are feeling. Would you say neither the actors nor the director feels well, or neither the actors nor the director feel well? Be careful about this one. My compound subject is actors as well as director, but because it's one of those neither nor, or you could say it as either or if you had nor, or if you had or, what you use for your verb is the one noun that's closer to the verb. In this case, it's director. And so I almost just ignore the rest of this sentence and I asked, would I say, does the director feels well? Or would I say, the director feel well? I would say the director feels well because director's singular and I need a singular verb. Well, to have a singular verb, I need a verb that ends in an S, unlike the noun itself. Does that make sense? I know it might not be the normal way of our writing and speaking. This is the one. That's why I'm telling you this kind of tricky, so pay close attention to those. Now look, on number 7, I'm just going to flip-flop the order of these two, and I want you to notice how that directly affects my sentence. I'm saying the same thing, neither the director nor the actors. Okay, so my compound subject is director as well as actors, but here do I use feel or feels? I just want to ignore the first part of this sentence and just look at these last, well, I will have is 4 words on this bottom line. Would I say the actors feel well or the actors feels well? I would say the actors feel well. And the reason I don't have an S is because plural verbs don't have an S, but look, plural nouns do. And plural verbs have to be in agreement with plural nouns. And if the one has an S, the other typically is not going to have an S. So number 7, correctly, is neither the actors nor the director feels well, because feels is closer to a singular subject, or a singular noun, I should say. Number 7, you would say neither the director nor the actors feel well, because this plural verb is closest to this plural noun. And that's the reason behind it. Okay, as I am doing in math class, if you allow me just a minute, I'm going to cut the video and I'm going to erase this and I'm going to put new information up there so we can talk about the special rules of B, and then we're going to be all done with English for the day. Okay, so we've discussed the rule, but you know English very well by this point. There's always an exception to every rule. And the verb form that's so irregular and unique, be, certainly is that. So let's go through and discuss. Normally it's just the present tense that can change. However, with the verb form of be, it's also the past tense that can do so. Now look, for instance, of the verb form be in the present tense. In first person singular, I am, okay? But if we make that pronoun plural, we, it's not we am, but it's we are. And it's not I are, but it's I am. And it's not we am, but it's we are. So in the present tense, that changes on the basis of whether it's singular or plural. That might not be as different, but this one is. In the past tense, it also changes. You don't say I were, you say I was. Consequently, you don't say we was. Oh, when I hear that, it drives me nuts. And if you're going to be a true grammar Nazi, which I expect out of every one of you, that should be the first thing that really makes your blood boil. Not we was, but we were. Now, what's kind of unique is you look in second person, and regardless of singular or plural, there is no change there. If it's you singular, it's you are. If it's you plural, it's you are. In the past tense, if it's you singular, it's you were. And if it's plural in the past tense, it's you were. It equally drives me insane when I hear, yes, you was. Don't ever say that. Say, you were. You were, whether singular or plural. But look, those stay the same in the present tense. They stay the same in the past tense. Third person is like first person. You don't say he are, you say he is. Well, you don't say they is, you say they are. So you see it changes on the basis of singularity or plurality in the third person. Same thing in the past tense, and this is what's a little bit different. You don't say he were, you say he was. But if you use the plural subject, you don't say they was, you say they were. And that's another one in the Ozarks especially, that sometimes we don't speak or write those things correctly, but we're going to be true grammar Nazis, and so we want to be able to do so. I want to take this information, these are pronouns, but I want to take this information and I want to plug it in with nouns that are not pronouns and are being used as subjects, and show that you can use third person, which we're going to do for these. We're going to use third person, and you can see how you can apply the same concepts regardless of whether you're using a pronoun or a normal noun. Now, would you say, and we're going back to the Andersons' hike and time they spent down by the river. Number one, would you say the crawdads is hiding or the crawdads are hiding? And I'm just going to put one underline. A lot of times we do that for the subject, but I'm going to do that for the verb. You would say the crawdads are hiding. Why? Because it's present tense and it's third person. And look, if you have a plural subject, which we do, it's are and it's not is. So you see how we use that handy dandy pronoun chart also for our normal nouns. Would you say Miss Nicole was excited to be outdoors, or Miss Nicole were excited to be outdoors? Well, this is past tense, so we would go over here in this column. Is Miss Nicole plural or singular? Singular. So look, we use the verb was. Miss Nicole was excited to be outdoors. On number three, the dog is a family pet or the dog are a family pet? Well, that's a singular subject, so it's going to be one of these two columns, this one or this one. And notice the verb forms, is or are, those are present. So we're dealing right here with this column. We're talking in the third person, and so it's going to be singular, third person, first column, present tense. So what form do we use? We wouldn't say the dog are a family pet anyway, but again, I'm just showing you the reason behind. There's a method to the madness. There's our rules in place. How about number four? Their shoes is filled with rocks. After their trip, and by the way, I did see your dog. I think it may have just been on the hike. It may not have been on the river, but Micaiah was toting it around like a sweet little baby in her front kangaroo mama pouch. But on number four, I'm sure their shoes is now filled with rocks or are. Well, that is present tense. My two choices, either is or are, so it's going to be over here. Now, we're dealing with the third person, okay, because it's not I, and it's not you or your or my or that sort of thing, but it's there, so it's third person, all right, and it's present tense. We need to ask, is the word shoes, is it singular or is it plural? Well, that's plural, and look, we choose are on the basis of that. So their shoes, not is, but their shoes are filled with rocks. And again, we understand that. We would probably get that right anyway. I want it to be clear what the rules are behind it, and these are the reasons why for agreement between subjects and their predicates, or in other words, their verbs. If you have a singular subject, that which typically does not end in S, you need a singular verb which typically does end in S. If you have a plural subject, that often does end in S, then you would need a plural verb, which ordinarily does not end in S. And that's the general rule behind it, even though there are exceptions. All right, thanks for paying attention, guys. Make sure, if you need to, look back on the video, but ensure that you have very good notes. You can use this for your test that you'll be taking at the end of next week. Thanks, guys.